is it going, guys? I hope everybody's been doing well. I've been away for a bit dealing with some stuff, but I am back with our favorite build. So I've seen a lot of main builds that are like GG'd out for this, but I haven't seen many budget builds, and I'm aware how that sounds with, you know, two goals as a budget. But I mean, that's really the bare minimum to make this build work. So we are talking about the martial arts, and so there really isn't a lot of must-haves to get this build going other than the two mosaics. I do like the treachery because the attack speed and the sin skills. It's a pretty cheap budget rune word. You could also go with a smoke, depending on how your resistance situation is looking like. I have a bunch of all res GCs here. Now, realistically, you aren't going to have them as all res. You might get a couple fire, a couple lightning, res GCs, and so on and so on. Maybe some small resistance charms and so on. But essentially, your goal here, you're going to want to try and get it yourself a Shaco, because that physical damage reduction is nice. The physical damage reduced by the string of ears. Those two combined with your level 15 fade that can proc off the treachery is going to cap out your physical resistance at 50%. Now, you could also go with the smoke. That's another great budget option. Essentially just get your res rings. You're going to be lacking on your attack rating starting out, so you're going to want to get the angelic set, the necklace, amulet, and the rings, or ring. Then the other one, you're going to want a resistance ring. Now, these are a bit more expensive. It's kind of just RNG on what you can get to drop for your res boots. But a good budget option also is Natalia's. If you can get a decent rolled Natalia's, I think it is cold and lightning resist, if I remember right. Any three martial arts, or any martial arts gloves, pretty much. Like, you could also technically go for Drax, but one thing that I found with this build is if you spec into that Fist of Fire, it takes away a big chunk of your physical damage, making it so that you don't really take advantage of Leech. So, build's pretty simple. We have the res charms. I already went through all of the main pieces. We have the Light Sunder, but this build definitely does still work without it, considering you pack multiple damage types. Budget-wise, you probably won't have your hands on an Annihilus or a Torch yet. But again, the biggest thing, you can see I'm at about 1600 life. That'll probably dip down to about 1400 if you're sitting at level 83 without the Annie and the Torch. And your resistances won't be capped without Fade. But again, we make sure that we put 1 point into Fade, 1 point into Shadow Warrior, 1 point into Mind Blast, because it can be handy to get yourself out of sticky situations. Since we've already done that, it was worth putting it into, or one into Shadow Master. But this is where the bulk of your points are going to go. You are going to want to max out, you're going to want to drop 1 point into Dragon Talon. That's the very first thing that you do. You're going to want to put 20 points into Phoenix Strike, 20 points into Claws of Thunder, pretty much as a bare minimum starter for this build if you're going for the lightning variation. Definitely get the ice, because the ice is very nice static and solid freezes stuff, as in it can't move. And then the fire is where we're going to want some points eventually, but I went with Tiger Strike so it didn't take away from my Leech for now, because this is, again, a budget version. You're not going to be having anything amazing. Now, I've seen a couple light versions of this build. We're going to want to pick somewhere dense. Now, this is one of the things that really sucks about running this build if you're not high enough level or you're not spec'd out quite well enough, is that you build your charges, you're always in a rush getting to the next enemy, and I absolutely do love this build. I've been waiting for the martial arts sin to get a solid reworker buff to it for a long time, because let's be real, it just was not up to par for any of the other builds for various classes. So we pop our fade, we're going to start building our charges. The mosaic makes it so that our finishers are always going, well, our finishers always hit now with the new patch, but it refreshes our timer on the charges so they don't go away. They last for 14 seconds, which I found usually is long enough. And you can see we have a very Christmas tree-like personality with our skills. So we got all our charges going. You can see it's a bit of a trek. We have to kind of just run and hope we find monsters. The Fade, Shaco, and the String are going to max out our physical resistance, the charms, and if you can get yourself an rune. I know early on I was running a Ral and Ort, like separately, to give me some more fire and light res. This is definitely not a build that you can put together at a lower level or a subpar amount of gear. Like, I am aware that 2 goals is not even close to budget, but if you were to compare it with, you know, your MA lifers, your Enigma, your Maras, you're kind of stuck with that, the mosaics as a base minimum for the build. Now I guess another alternative to the Shaco, you could rock the Bulwark, or, you know, a couple other things. Essentially you're just looking to get your resistances. You can see exactly how just this whole thing just ruins everything though. Like, its damage is ridiculous. Now granted, we are only on players 1, but this thing performs just as wonderful in players 8. And why does Andy have to have that? But yeah, that didn't last very long at all. So again, there's a lot more res charms than you would probably have in a budget build. Like, the cheapest thing to do would probably just be getting a bunch of large GCs that are between 20 and 30 of a single resistance and stacking them up. Like, I'll show you real quick here. If I drop 4 of my all-res charms, so you can see that we are still maxed out with Fade. And that's just with the default plus skills on the gear. So, with that being said, I don't think there's anything left to go through for the build. Tiger Strike, I don't think I ended up adding those charges when I was charging up. The build definitely plays a lot smoother on controller because it's a one-stop shop for all your buttons. You don't have to hit F1, charge it up, F2, charge it up on keyboard and so on to get your charges. It's just hit a button, hit a button, hit a button, and then you're good to go. Last thing I'll go into, if you haven't played this class before, is your finishers use up charges. The mosaics make it so that you don't use up charges, but you still get the effect. Each of these skills, you can see the different charge levels and what they do. It adds a bunch of extra damage, various effects like the freezing, the fire, and the Nova and Thunder, Charge Bolt, and so on, depending on how many hits you do to build that certain level of charges. Phoenix Strike, charge 1, it does 1 meteor per kick that you do on Dragon Talon or any other finisher. I really like Dragon Talon. Or the one that I was using in this video was Chaos Ice Bolt. You get all these charges built up, and then you hit with Dragon Talon, and every time you hit with a finisher, which is Dragon Talon, anything on this side, it will reset the duration for 14 seconds. Now, without further ado, if you guys like this build, please like and subscribe. Any questions about maybe some gear alternatives or how to go about building this, just feel free to post in the comments, and have yourself a wonderful day.